Jesus makes it clear that we get judgment backwards. We are ridiculously quick to judge the speck in our neighbor's eye, but we ignore the log or the plank that's right there in our own eye. Jesus, of course, is intentionally using funny and hyperbolic imagery here, but it gets the point across. We don't hesitate to point out the smallest of things that our neighbor may have done wrong, but we don't even acknowledge the massive wrongdoings that we do in our own lives. And this passage absolutely asks us to call attention to things that others are doing that is sinful. The goal is that nothing any of us does has the potential to turn anyone else away from God. But the instruction in this passage is also clear. We cannot ignore the things that we ourselves do wrong. We cannot be blind to our own sins. We are not qualified to help someone remove the speck from their own eye unless we have worked and continue to work on eradicating our own sins. If we judge first without removing that hypothetical log, Scripture is clear. We are hypocrites. Philip Yancey is a prolific Christian author who has been writing for decades. We've studied a number of his works here at the church over the years. And he once relayed a story about a friend of his who compared going to AA versus going to church. And this is what Philip Yancey's friend said. When I am late to church, people turn around and stare at me with frowns of disapproval. I get the clear message that I am not as responsible as they are. When I am late to AA, the meeting comes to a halt, and everyone jumps up to hug and welcome me. They realize that my lateness may be a sign that I almost didn't make it. When I show up, it proves that my desperate need for them won out over my desperate need for alcohol. I had a friend who invited me to go with her to an AA meeting about a dozen years ago when I was living in Florida. She was going to share her story, and she asked me to be there to support her. And I can tell you that that statement is unequivocally true. That AA group was one of the most welcoming groups of people with whom I have ever had the privilege of spending time. What if church looked like that AA meeting? What if we were that non-judgmental and loving to people? What if, when people show up here late, we don't stare at them or make them feel unwelcome, but instead remember that it may be a sign that they were this close to not making it here at all? If you're on time for church, try not to judge someone for being late. If we go back to that speck and that log or that plank imagery, you would need to address the things that you have done wrong that are far worse than being late to church before you can judge someone for that. Sometimes, someone being late to church proves that their desperate need for Jesus won out over everything else. Sometimes it reflects that they had to wrestle children to get here or deal with a flare-up from a chronic illness that slowed them down enough to make them late. What if, when people who arrive late come into worship and are searching for a place to sit, we don't give them the side eye of disapproval, but instead joyfully welcomed them? And to take it a step further, what if we gave up our seat, moved down in our row or in our pew, and made room for them whenever they came in during the service?